This problem says find the intercepts and graph each equation by plotting points. Be sure to label the intercepts. So we're going to find the intercepts and then graph each equation by plotting. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a table. We don't need our table right away because first what we're going to do is find the intercepts. Okay, so to find the intercepts, so I'm going to say x-intercept. And make sure you label these x-intercept and y-intercept. It's not enough just to say intercepts. So be careful with that, just so you get full credit. So what we're going to do is when I'm dealing with an x-intercept, so that means my point would have to be on the x-axis. So that means my point could be here, it could be here, it could be over here. Now the thing is, with all of those points, think about what I know that's consistent with the other points. So for instance, if it was this point, this would be -1, -2, -3, -4, -5. So that would be -5, 0. And this point here would be 2, 0. And this point here would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 0. Now what I'm saying is, notice that every one of them has a 0 for y. So that tells me there that if it's going to be on the x-axis, y has to be 0. So what we're going to do here is we're just simply going to say here that, hey, I'm just going to plug in y for 0. 0 for y. Okay, so I know that y equals 0 with any x-intercept. So this is going to be 4x squared plus 0 equals 4. And then I get 4x squared equals 4. And then I divide by 4, and I get x squared equals 1. And then x is going to equal plus or minus 1. So this tells me here I'm going to get 2 x-intercepts. All right, now let's do the y-intercept. And it's a similar idea. I come over here and I say, hey, I go to the graph. And I say, hey, let's see where my points have to be. They're going to have to be on this y-axis if they're going to be y-intercepts. And I'm just thinking about, hey, what do all these points have in common again? And then I know this is 0, -3. This is 0, 1. And this is 1, 2, 3, 4. So this would be 0, 4. Now if we notice, all of the x values here are 0. So that tells me that if it's going to be a y-intercept, that my x has to be 0. So I'm going to come over here and say, okay, so I know my x has to be 0 if it's going to be a y-intercept. So then all I do here is I plug in 0 for my x. And that's plus y equals 4. So this whole piece right here becomes 0 because 0 squared is 0, 4 times 0 is 0, and I'm actually only going to end up with y equals 4. So these are my intercepts here, both x and y. And remember, label these. And don't just keep it as an x equals plus or minus 1. Write out the ordered pairs. So what I mean by that is my x-intercepts are going to be -1, 0. And +1, 0. So write those out. That's actually my intercepts. And for the y, it's going to be 0, 4. Okay, if you don't write those out in that way, you won't get full credit for it. You have to show them as points. They are points. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to use this table that I have to the right of it now. And we're going to start to fill this in because we need to graph this equation. Because it says graph each equation by plotting points. So we need a bunch of points. So an XY table is perfect for that. Okay, so now we're just going to pick different values for this. Now I'm going to stay around 0 because, notice this here for my x, because my x is being squared. So I might go with maybe -3. And I choose to plug in for my x because that's being squared. It's easier to deal with. If it's my y, I'm going to have to solve for x and I'll be square rooting and stuff. So always look for the easiest one if possible. Okay, so I'm going to go with the -3 for the x. So -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3. Now there's really never a set number of points that I would say for any equation. It depends on the equation, so make sure you're careful with that. All right, so here we go. So we're just going to plug in that -3 now. And I'm just going to show the math for it. I'm not going to run through each of these because you guys know how to plug things in. So the first one turns out to be -32. Now you can run through the math if you want, but this is kind of where we ended up. Let me just put that in for the y value. So now I have the ordered pair, -3, -32. Now that's going to be hard to graph on my graph. I'm just going to have to guess it because I don't have that many notches here. I think I go 10 in each direction. So again, sometimes I have to rescale. I could do that as well. I'll just rescale it is what I'll do. Like maybe 5 for each or something. Sometimes that's what we do too when we have limited notches. So I'll have to scale that, and I will when I get to graphing it. So for the next one, I'm going to plug in -2. Now for the next one, y equals -12. Oh, -32, -12. Okay, now I'm going to keep going down, and I'm just going to fill the rest of this in now. I kind of showed you the first couple, showed you how it worked. So now I'm just going to put the values in. So there are the rest of the values. So now what we're going to do with this one is now we're going to graph it. So now I have to think about my scale here. I know I go to -32 on the y, but my x's go by individual ones. So the x I can have different from the y as far as the scaling, which that's what I'm going to do here so I can fit it all in. But make sure if you have different scaling, you must label it so I know when I'm checking your stuff. So that's going to be 1, 2. And actually, I'm going to do that in black. So actually, I scaled it a little differently here. I went by 4s on the y, so every 4. And on the x, I went every 2 is 1. So yeah, that's a little different. You don't have to be like that, but you definitely got to make sure all your points are going to fit if you're going to get full credit for everything here. And it has to be clear. It has to be a little precise. So now the first one I'm going to do is -3, -32. So that's going to be down here. Oops, I went down too far. So there's my point there. There's my first point. The next point is going to be -2, 12. So that's 4, 8, 12. So it's going to be there. And then my third one is -1, 0. So it's going to be here. And then I have 0, 4. So that's going to be here. And then 1, 0. And then 2, -12. And then the last point here is going to be 3, -32. So there it is. And if we draw the, actually connect the dots, really complete the graph, draw the graph. It's going to go like this, and on this side it's going to go this way. So here we get to see what's necessary for a completed graph using points. Now, notice what it says at the end of this. It says, be sure to label the intercepts. So now I have to also put those in there too. So my y-intercept is here, 0, 4. And then my x-intercept's here. Now remember, this point goes there. And then my x-intercepts are -1, 0, and 1, 0. So now that's our completed graph. So as you see, these graphs kind of take a little bit of time. That's only one graph we did, and it took us almost 10 minutes. So, and don't forget your labels. If you don't put labels in, you won't get full credit.